And we're going to finish this lesson off with talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. So if I have two lines that are side by side and they never intersect, they're never going to intersect if their slope is the same. If their rise over run is the same on both of them, then they're never going to intersect. Now, the abbreviation for parallel looks exactly like parallel lines, or the two L's in parallel. You have two lines right beside each other. Now, perpendicular lines aren't as commonly, I don't know, thought about, talked about, as well known, I guess. If you can remember back to your geometry days, perpendicular lines make 90-degree angles. So, honestly, for example, your coordinate system, right, this X and Y axis, those are perpendicular lines. They make perfect 90-degree angles right there. So the symbol for perpendicular kind of looks like an upside down capitalized T, because what do we get? We get those 90-degree angles. Now, perpendicular lines have slope that are considered opposite reciprocals. So what do I mean by opposite reciprocals? For example, if I have something like 2/3, it's opposite reciprocal, meaning one positive, one negative. So since this one's positive, this one is negative. And reciprocals mean flipping that fraction. So instead of it being 2/3, it is now 3/2. So the opposite reciprocal to 2/3 is -3/2. Or if we do something like like 1/7, no, let's do -1/7. Opposite reciprocal, since this one is negative, this one will now be positive, and flip that fraction for reciprocal. So instead of it being 1/7, it is now 7/1, which is the same as just 7. Okay, so now that we know the relationship between slopes of parallel lines and slopes of perpendicular lines, let's find equations of a line that is parallel and perpendicular to given lines. Example 6. Find the equation of a line that is parallel to the line y equals 5x and contains the point 2, -3. Okay, so in this equation right here, what is my slope? Okay, slope is whatever's in front of that x. So my slope here is 5. Because I want a parallel slope, what would my parallel slope be if my slope here is 5? Well, parallel lines have the same slope, so I also need a line with a slope of 5. So I now have my slope, and I have my point. This is my x1, y1. What equation am I going to use here if I now know my slope and I have one point? Hopefully you said point slope formula, because that's what I have. I have one point and I have a slope. So my point slope is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Substitute in your parallel slope and your point right here. So y minus y1 is a -3. So minus a negative becomes +3. I'm using my parallel slope right here, which is 5. And then x minus x1, which is 2. Now, honestly, if I need an equation, that is an equation. But let's go ahead and put this into y equals mx plus b form. So the first thing I'm going to do is distribute in that slope. And then subtract your 3. So I do have parallel lines. The slopes are the same. And if we graphed this, we would eventually get to that point to -3. Now in part B, now I want a perpendicular line that is perpendicular to the line of y equals -3x and contains the point -7, 0. And they're always going to tell you parallel or perpendicular. Then use your information from up here. What is my slope of the equation that they give me? Okay, hopefully you said -3. It is not -3x. It is what's in front of that x. So now I need my perpendicular slope. So what is my perpendicular slope to -3? I am looking for its opposite reciprocal. Opposite meaning one positive, one negative, and reciprocal, flip your fraction. So because this is -3, this will be positive slope. 3 is the same as 3 over 1. When I flip that, that becomes 1 over 3. I have my point. Here's my x1, y1. I have a slope and I have a point. I am using my point slope again. So we are substituting on n our perpendicular slope for our m and plugging in our point into our x1, y1. So we get y minus my y1, which is 0. My m is my new perpendicular slope, which is 1/3. And then we get x minus x1, which is a -7. So minus a negative becomes a +7. Now y minus nothing is simply y. So all we need to do here is distribute in this slope. Now I know we don't like fractions in general, but this one's not that bad. 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. And 1/3 times 7 is 7/3. When you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. So 1 times 7 is 7. 3 times 1 is 3. If you are not comfortable doing that by hand, use your handy dandy calculator. Okay, remember 1/3 is just 1 divided by 3. So 1 divided by 3 times 7. We get this decimal right here. We're going to go right here to math and change that to a fraction, and we get 7/3. So don't be scared of fractions. We have our handy dandy calculator here. All right, that's all I have for this lesson. So if I can find my first sheet here, hopefully, we can now calculate the slope of a line and determine whether it is increasing, decreasing, or constant. We can graph lines in slope-intercept form, which is your y equals mx plus b. We can use the point slope form of a line, which is your y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. We can write the equation of a line in multiple forms, and we were given that. We were given a graph. We were given a table. We were given a slope and a point, and we were given simply 2 points. So we were able to write that in slope-intercept form. That's all of example 4, given information 4 different ways. And then lastly, we found equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. If I went too fast on anything, you can pause and rewind and go back to that specific spot. Email me if you have any questions.